Hey friends, hi. Hi friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Gimel, Daf 3 of Masechet Rosh Hashanah. Friends, when's the last time y'all ate spaghetti? When's the last time y'all experienced spaghetti? Friends, we're going to experience spaghetti today. On today's Daf, we are going to try to figure out how we know that Nissan is in fact the Rosh Hashanah l'Melachim. Here we go. So we're going to start on Daf Beis Amud Beis. About halfway through the page, because we stopped there because there's just long continuation that goes on for quite a while. So we're just going to start there on Daf Beis Amud Beis, about halfway through the page. It says, Amr Rabbi Yochanan minayin l'Melachim she'ein monin loim ela minisan. Friends, you got the place? About halfway through the page. I don't know, probably about 30, 40 lines from the bottom. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan minayin l'Melachim she'ein monin loim ela minisan. So how do we know that when it comes to kings, we only start counting from Nissan? So the Gemara answers, Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayi b'shmonim shoneh, v'arbameu shoneh, that it was 480 years, l'tzeis pnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, for 480 years from when the Yidden exodus from, that's probably not a word, right, Dennis? From when the Yidden left Eretz Mitzrayim, Bashana Arbias, and it was the fourth year, B'chodesh Ziv, B'chodesh Hasheni, in the second month, which is Iyar, which is Ziv, L'melech Shlomo al Yisrael. So basically, the fourth year since Shlomo took the reign over the Yidden. So what does the pasuk say? So it says, in describing the year that we're talking about, so it says the fourth year of the reign of Shlomo HaMelech, and it also says 480 years since the Yidden left Egypt. Right? It says it's right. So says the Gemara, Makish Malchus Shlomo L'Tzias Mitzrayim. So we're comparing the kingship, the fourth year of the kingship of Shlomo, to the 480 years since the Yidden left Egypt. Or said differently, we're comparing the kingship of Shlomo to the exodus of Egypt. Ma'itzias Mitzrayim Nissan. Just like the exodus from Egypt, we count from Nissan. So the Yidden left Mitzrayim in Nissan, and then, each subsequent year on Nissan, so it's one more year, right? So the next Nissan, it's already now been year 1, 1 year since they left Egypt, etc. So also, the kingship of Shlomo HaMelech, we're going to count from Nissan, that the Rosh Hashanah for the kingship of Shlomo HaMelech is Nissan. Givaldik. Friends, you got that? Because the pasuk compares the reign of Shlomo HaMelech to the exodus of Egypt. Since we count the Rosh Hashanah essentially for the exodus of Egypt is Nissan, so therefore the Rosh Hashanah l'Melachim of the reign of Shlomo is also Nissan. Givaldik. V'tzias Mitzrayim gufa minal and Nissan maninon dilma mitishrei maninon. Friends, get ready. So how do we know that if we can call it like the Rosh Hashanah for Yetzias Mitzrayim? How do we know that we count the years since Yetzias Mitzrayim from Nisan? Maybe we count the years of Yetzias Mitzrayim from Tishrei, meaning, obviously, Yetzias Mitzrayim happened in Nisan, but, kind of just like we said by the kings, right? We said yesterday that, if a king becomes king on the last day, Yom Echad B'Shana Chashuv Shana, that, even one day in a year could be considered like a year. So the same thing over here, meaning maybe the Yidden left Egypt in Nisan, sure, but comes Tishrei 6 months later, we already start counting it as the next year. So comes 6 months later, already now we're in year 2 since the Yidden left Egypt. And we count every subsequent year the exodus of Egypt from Tishrei, that every subsequent Tishrei is one more year that we count since the Yidden left Egypt. Lo sakadatich, don't say that. Tichsiv, because we have 2 psukim. Friends, we have 2 psukim. The first one is, Vayal Aharon HaKohen El Hor Hahar Al Pi Hashem Vayomus Sham. So Aharon HaKohen went up to Hor Hahar by the word of God, and he died Darton. He died there on Hor HaHar. When? Bishnaso Arba'im L'tzeis Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. In the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt. B'chodesh Achmishi. In the 5th month. Friends, what's the 5th month? Of. Because we count months from Nissan. So Nissan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Of. So in the 5th month, so the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt, in the 5th month, Be'echad l'chodesh, on the 1st of the month. So we see that Aharon died on the 1st of in the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt, Uchsid, and it also says in the Torah later on, by Boim Shana, he was in the 40th year, Be'ashtei Asar Chodesh, on the 11th month. What's the 11th month? I don't know, Shvat. The 11th month is Shvat. So now we're talking about the 40th year in the 11th month. Be'echad l'chodesh, on the 1st of the month, of the 1st of Shvat. Diber Moshe v'gomer. The Eibishter spoke with Moshe. So we have 2 psukim. One of them says that Aharon died in the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt, in the 5th month, in Av. And then it says later on that still in the 40th year, in Shvat, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. So what do we see? That of the 40th year since they left Egypt was prior to Shvat of the same 40th year. Now, Tishrei is between those 2 days, right? Of Elul Tishrei. So if we count the years since the Yidden left Egypt from Tishrei, well then, if we're saying of in the 40th year, well then would come Elul, and then Tishrei, that would already be the 41st year. But we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden in the 40th year. So it must mean that in order for Aharon to have died in of the 40th year, and for Moshe to then subsequently speak with the Yidden in Shvat of the same 40th year, Memele, it must mean that we're counting the years from Yetzias Mitzrayim from Nissan. So it goes Nissan, right? So the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt began in Nissan. Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Of. That is when Aharon died. Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat is then when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. So it must be midikoi be'av the correlation from the fact that by Aharon he died in Av, and we're calling it the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt. And then when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden in Shvat, and we're still calling it the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt, Michlad Rosh Hashanah lav Tishrehu. So Mimele, Rosh Hashanah must not be Tishrei, rather it must be Nisan. You guys got that? Good, let's go weiter. Bishlama Heyoch Mefarish Yetzias Mitzrayim. So now fact the Gemara, 1 second. We just had 2 psukim, friends. The first pasuk by Aharon, when he died, so it says that it was the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt. So that's pretty clear. However, the second pasuk by Moshe Rabbeinu, when he spoke with the Yidden, it doesn't say the 40th year to what? It just says the 40th year. What does it say? It doesn't say the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt. Maybe it's the 40th year since some other thing. How do we know that the pasuk by Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about 40 years since Yetzias Mitzrayim? Dilma lakomas hamishkan. Maybe it's 40 years since the Mishkan was erected. Now the Mishkan was erected in the 2nd year since from when the Yidden left Egypt. So now it could be that actually we count sort of the next 1 year since the Yidden left Egypt from Tishrei, okay? And therefore the Yidden left Egypt in Nisan. Comes Tishrei, it's already the next year. Fine. And therefore, if that's the case, well, then Aharon died in of the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt. but then comes Elul and then Tishrei, now it's already year 41. So how could it say then that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke later on in Shvat, still in the 40th year? Well, 40th year since what? Maybe it's 40th year, maybe it's the 41st year since Yetzias Mitzrayim, but the 40th year since when the Mishkan was built in the second year. Oh, friends. What do you guys think? Very sharp, right? Very spaghetti, Lamaisa. Very spaghetti. Okay, fine, spaghetti. Kidam Rav Papa. The Gemara answers no. It's like Rav Papa says, Shnas Esrim, Gzeir Shava. We're going to see later on Gzeir Shava of, it says Shnas Esrim in 2 psukim. Therefore, it must be the same year. Here also, when it says Shnas Esrim, Halchanami, here also Shnas Arboim, Gzeir Shava. Therefore, here as well, when it says Shnas Arboim in the pasuk by Aharon and Shnas Arboim in the pasuk of Moshe Rabbeinu, Ma'kan Yetzias Mitzrayim, just like 40th year from, right, in the context of Aharon was from Yetzias Mitzrayim, Afkan Yetzias Mitzrayim, also by Moshe Rabbeinu, we're talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So therefore, we see that both the of Aharon and Shvat of Moshe Rabbeinu was the 40th year since the Yidden left Egypt, and therefore, if we're going to assume, as we're going to challenge in a minute, but if for now we're going to assume that first Aharon died in Av, and then later on Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden in Shvat, and they're both 40 years since the Yidden left Egypt, so then Mimele, we're counting 40 years from Nissan and not from Tishrei. Wow. Let's go weiter. Affecting Gemara though. Why are we assuming that these psukim are in order? Why are we assuming that Aharon died before Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden? How do we know that Aharon dying in Av preceded Moshe Rabbeinu speaking with the Yidden in Shvat? Dilma, perhaps. Ma'aseh de Shvat Kodim. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden in Shvat before Aharon died in Av. Meaning, maybe Take, we start counting Yetzias Mitzrayim from Tishrei, and therefore came Tishrei of the 40th year. It was already considered the 40th year. And then comes Shvat, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat, which is when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. Adar, Nissan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av is then when Aharon died. So maybe it's just out of order. Maybe first Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So maybe we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Nissan, and first Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden in Shvat, and then only afterwards did, I don't know what I just said, we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Tishrei, and then first Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden in Shvat, and then only later on did Aharon die in Av. To which the Gemara answers, Lo satadaitech, don't bark up that tree. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, Achrei akoso es sichon. Well, because it says in the pasuk by Moshe Rabbeinu that when did Moshe Rabbeinu speak with the Yidden in Shvat, and it was after he already smote Sichon. At the time that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden, he had already smitten Sichon. V'chinoch nafshi de Aharon akati havasichon kaim. And when Aharon died, Sichon was still alive, which means that if Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to the Yidden after Sichon was already smitten and dead, so then Memele, Aharon was already dead as well. Because when Aharon was dead, Sichon was still alive, which means that by the time Sichon was dead, Memele, Aharon was also dead. So if we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden after he had already smitten Sichon, so then Memele, Aharon was already dead, which means that Aharon's death preceded Moshe Rabbeinu speaking with the Yidden, which means that if they're both 40 years from when the Yidden left Egypt, Memele, the 40 years must be starting from Nisan and not from Tishrei. And when Aharon died, Sichon was still alive. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayishma Aknaini Melech Arod that the Canaanite, the king of Arad, heard. Mashmu Shama, what did he hear? Shama Shemis Aharon, what he heard was that Aharon died. He heard that Aharon died, and that when Aharon died, the Anone Akovid, the clouds of glory that would protect the Yidden, so they went away. And therefore this Knaani, he figured, okay, Nitna Rishos Lilachem B'Yisrael, that there is permission to fight against the Yidden. Behind the Chsiv, and this is what the pasuk says: Vayiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aharon, that all of the Yidden saw that Aharon died. V'amar Babo atikri vayiru ela vayirau, and Babo says, don't read it vayiru that they saw, but ela vayirau, they were exposed. And Kid Reish Lakish, and like Reish Lakish says, the Amar Reish Lakish, that says Reish Lakish, ki mishamash b'dal l'shonis, that ki can be translated in 4 ways: if, Dilma, perhaps, Ella, that, and Deha, because. Meaning that, so when you read the pasuk of Vayiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aharon, it means Vayira'u kol ha'eda, the entire Eda was exposed, ki, because gava Aharon, that because Aharon died, and because the Anoni HaKavod went away, which would protect the Yidden, therefore they were exposed, and because they were exposed, and because they were exposed, that is why the Kanaani, the king of Arad, the Kanaani, he felt that it was a auspicious time, that this was the time to fight against the Yidden because they were exposed. Now, fact the Gemara, as you might be thinking, Midami, Hasum Kanan, Ocha Sichon. What does this have to do with Sichon? How does this prove that after Aharon's death, Sichon then attacked the Yidden? It doesn't say anything about Sichon, it says about the Kanaani. So Tana hu Sichon hu Arad hu Kanan. So we have a brisa that says that, well, Sichon is this Melech Arad. Sichon is this Kanaani. Sichon shedom l'siach b'midbar. His name is Sichon because he's similar to a desert foal. Friends, who knows what a foal is? Lemaisa, I'm actually not sure. I think it's something to do with a horse. Maybe some kind of a young horse. Maybe Dennis, you could let us know, or really just anybody with Google. Dennis, I think we'll save you for more complicated things. So full. You go to google.com or just in most address bars in your browser, and you type in FOAL, and you post the results in WhatsApp. Fine. So he's called Sichon because he's like a desert foal. Kanan al Shem Malchuso. We call him. What's going on? The Babylon Talmud, it's a good chevra, the Babylon Talmud. It's a nice little thing. Weiter. Canaan, Hashem Malchuso. Why was he called Canaan? Because that was his kingship, the kingship of Canaan, the Canaanite kingship. Umashmo, Arad Shmo. And what's his name, Lemaise? His real name is Arad. Okay, fine, very good. So therefore, when he says Vayishma Kanani Melech Arad, right, that the Kanani, the Melech Arad, i.e., a synonym for Sichon, so Sichon heard that Aharon died, so he thought it was an auspicious time to attack the Yidden. So we see that Memele, when Aharon died, Sichon was still alive. And therefore, if we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden after Sichon was already dead, so then Memele, Aaron was also dead, so Aaron must have died before. So Aaron dying of the 40th year preceded Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to the Yidden in Shvat of the 40th year. Ikadam, to those who say, Arad Shedom Arad Bamidbar. Why is he called Arad? Because he's similar to a wild donkey in the desert. I can mostly imagine what a wild donkey is. I just think of a non-wild donkey and imagine it being wild. Canaan al Shem Malchuso. Why is his name Canaan? Because that was his kingship, the Canaanite kingdom, I guess. Umashmo Sichon Shmo, but his real name is actually Sichon. Okay, Givaldik. No. So what do we say? So we say that Memele, it must be that if we have to choose, so first of all, Memele, it must be that Aharon dying in Av preceded Moshe Rabbeinu speaking with the Yidden in Shvat, and therefore if we have to choose between Nissan to be counting Yetzias Mitzrayim or Tishrei to be counting Yetzias Mitzrayim, Tishrei is ruled out because that would make Shvat be in the 41st year, so that can't be, and therefore it must be that we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Nissan. Okay? So now we're going to go shtickle spaghetti here. Imagine kind of taking a fork and putting it into the middle of the spaghetti and twirling it around a little bit. So this is now the next step of the Gemara. The spaghetti twirl. Ve'ema Rosh Hashanah Iyar. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go, friends. So let's say that Rosh Hashanah is actually Iyar, meaning, let's say that we start counting Yetzias Mitzrayim from Iyar, meaning, of course, once again, of course, the Yidden left Egypt in Nissan. However, perhaps, in terms of counting Yetzias Mitzrayim, the next month, when it came Nissan Iyar, when it came the next month of Iyar, already was considered that Yetzias Mitzrayim was last year, and it's a new year. This is already now from Iyar, it's year 2 since the Yidden left Egypt. Okay, fine. And then that would be fine, because the Yidden left, so already the new year is from Iyar, which means that the 40th year is counted from Iyar. Sivan Tammuz of Aharon died in of the 40th year, which began being counted from Iyar. And then later on in Shvat, which is still before the next Iyar, is when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. So maybe we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Iyar, and then Memela also we would count the reign of the kings from Iyar and not from Nisan. So Lo Salkadaitech, don't say that. Here's why. Because the pasuk says, "Vayibachodesh harishon bashana hashenis be'echad lachodesh hu kama mishkan." Okay, remember I mentioned that spaghetti twirl with the fork? Here we go. Vayi bachodesh harishon bashana hashenis be'echad lachodesh hu kama mishkan. That when was the Mishkan erected? When was the Mishkan constructed? Finished? Erected? Bachodesh harishon. In the first month. Friends, what's the first month? The first month is always Nisan. Of the second year, since the Yidden left Egypt, when are we suggesting that the second year begins? Iyar. So relative to Iyar, when is Nisan? Well, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar. Nisan, relative to Iyar, is month 12. So, therefore, basically, if we say, so Nisan is then the last month of the year, if basically we're starting to count from Iyar. So if we're saying that on the second year, since the Yidden left Egypt, in Nisan of the second year, the Mishkan was erected. So then we're saying that basically, again, the second year begins from Iyar, 1 month after Yetzias Mitzrayim, was now year 2, begins in Iyar. And in Nisan of that year, i.e. the last month of that year, the Mishkan was erected. So now, but we have another pasuk though, that says, Vayi bashana hashenis, bachodesh hasheni, that in Iyar of the second year, now again, if we're saying that the second year begins with Iyar, so Iyar of the second year is basically the first month of the second year. The cloud was lifted off of the Mishkan. So that doesn't make any sense. If we're saying that the year begins in Iyar, and we're saying that in Nisan of the second year, the Mishkan was erected, i.e. on the last month of the second year, the Mishkan was erected, but then it also says that on the second month, in the second year, i.e. in Iyar of the second year, which is the first month of the second year, the clouds were lifted from the Mishkan. The Mishkan wasn't to be built for another 11 months. So again, it makes no sense if we say that the Mishkan was erected in the last month of the second year, essentially, and then the clouds were lifted off of the Mishkan in the first month of that year, 11 months prior. That doesn't make any sense. It would obviously have to be that the Mishkan was erected first, and then the clouds were lifted off of the Mishkan afterwards. But if we're saying then that the Iyar, the second month, which is Iyar, is when the clouds were lifted, well then that would, if it happened after Nissan, and Nissan was the last month of the second year, well then the next month, which is Iyar, would then have to be in the third year, not the second year. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. So therefore, from the fact that we're saying that it's Nissan of the second year, and we're saying that Iyar in the second year, and we're saying that they're both in the same year, so then it must be Michlad Rosh Hashanah Lav Iyar, who it's therefore impossible for Rosh Hashanah to be Iyar for the reasons that we said. Because if Rosh Hashanah was Iyar, so in order for them to both be in the same year, Iyar would be the first month of the year, and Nisan would be the last month of the year. How could the clouds lift off of the Mishkan in the first month of the year if the Mishkan wasn't to be built for another 11 months in the last month of the year? It's an impossibility. So it cannot be that we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Iyar. Alright, moving on. Ve'ema Rosh Hashanah Sivan. Alright, why don't we suggest Sivan? Moving on, right? So first it makes sense with Nisan, but we're suggesting what about Iyar? We said Iyar is not going to work because of the whole cloud thing. What about Sivan? If we say that we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Sivan, so then Givaldik, the Yidden left Egypt in Nisan, Iyar, and then Sivan is already considered the new year. It's now considered already the second year. Okay? And then, fine, so the second year begins with Sivan, and then Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat, Adar, and then now comes Nisan of the second year. The Mishkan was erected. And then comes Iyar, the clouds were lifted off, and then also it'll work out that of the second year, right? Sivan, Tammuz, and then Av. That's when Aharon died. And then Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat is when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. So can't we suggest that maybe Rosh Hashanah, that we count Yetzias Mitzrayim from Sivan? Lo sakadaitech, no. The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, B'chodesh Hashlishi L'tzeis Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Well, it says that in the third month from when the Yidden left Egypt, they got to Midbar Sinai, right, to accept the Torah in Sivan. So now, if we're saying that it's the third month since the Yidden left Egypt, and it doesn't say that it was the second year, so it implies that it's still the same year, and it's the third, so it's the 3 months since the Yidden left Egypt, and it's still assuming that it's the same year. And if so, that Sivan was already considered the new year, well then it should say that on the third month since Yetzias Mitzrayim, in the second year, they got to Midbar Sinai. But it doesn't say that, it just says the third month, implying that it's still the same year. Okay, fine. Okay. Ve'ema Tammuz, ve'ema Av, ve'ema Adar. Okay, fine, but then moving on. So if it can't be Sivan, so let's suggest Tammuz. Let's suggest Av. Let's suggest Adar. Any of these could work, right? If we count Rosh Hashanah for Yetzias Mitzrayim from Tammuz, so Givaldik. So the year begins in Tammuz, comes Av, that's when Aharon died. Shvat, that's when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with Yidden. Or you can even say that Rosh Hashanah for Yetzias Mitzrayim is from Av, and that first month is when Aharon died, and later on in Shvat is when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. You could say that maybe it's Adar is from when we is when we count, right? Comes Adar, it's the new year, and then again, right, comes Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av is when Aharon died. Shvat, which would be the last day of the year, the last month of the year would be when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden, right? These are all months that could work. So why do we know that it has to be only Nisan? So Ella Omer Rebbe Elazar Mehacha Rather, says Rabbi Elazar from the following pasuk in Divrei Hayomim, Vayochel livnos b'chodesh hasheni b'sheni b'shnas arba lemalchuso. That it says by Shlomo HaMelech in a pasuk in Divrei Hayomim, it says that he began to build the Beis Hamikdash b'chodesh hasheni in the second month. B'sheni, what's the deal with this extra b'sheni? B'shnas arba lemalchuso, in the 4th year of his reign. So my sheni, what's this? B'chodesh hasheni b'sheni. What is this? Lav sheni liyerach shemonim bo lemalchuso. Is it not saying that he began building the Beis Hamikdash, that Shlomo Melech began building the Beis Hamikdash in the 4th year since he took the reign, in the second month of what? Well, in the second what? The second month since we start counting the new year. So it says the 4th year, in sort of the 4th year since we start counting, so the 4th year beginning from Nissan, Basheni, in the second month since the second month of that year of the new year that we began counting in Nissan. Maskefla Ravina. Ravina asks, wait, but how do I know that the second is the second month since they begin counting the new year for the kings? Ve'ema sheni b'chodesh. Maybe it's the second day of the month. Im kain sheni b'chodesh be'edja avaksiv bei. Well, if it was the second day of the month, it would have said so explicitly, right? Because we see different places, right? We even saw by the Mishkan, on the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month. So we see that. So if it was the second day of the month, it would have said the second day of the month. B'sheni b'Shabbos. Maybe it means it was Taka on Monday. Well, first of all, we don't really see anywhere in Psukim that it tells you what day of the week it was. It might tell you what day of the month it was. It doesn't tell you what day of the week it was. And more so, we compare the second sheni to the first sheni, right? It says b'chodesh hasheni b'sheni, ma'asheni kama chodesh av sheni basar chodesh. Just like the second, just like when it says b'sheni, the first b'sheni, it's talking about a month, b'chodesh hasheni. Also, the second sheni is talking about a month, i.e., it's the second month since they started counting the new year for kings, which is Nissan Givaldig. Okay, so we seem to have come to a conclusion that we count for kings from Nissan, Gishmak. Tanekavasi Rabbi Yochanan, and we have a Brisa Taka supporting Rabbi Yochanan who says, who sort of is bringing these proofs that Rosh Chodesh for kings is from Nissan. That the Brisa says, Minayin she'en monin loim lemlachim ela minisin. How do we know that we only count for kings from Nisan? We have a Brisa that says, how do we know that we only count for kings from Nisan? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, it was the 480 years from when the Yidden left Egypt, right? The 4th year of the reign of Shlomo. These are all the psukim that we've seen earlier, right? So in that pasuk we compare the reign of Shlomo to Yetzias Mitzrayim, just like Yetzias Mitzrayim was in Nissan. So also the reign of Shlomo is counted from Nissan, Uchsiv, and the pasuk also says, "Vayal Aharon HaKohen el Hor HaHor Api Hashem." Right. So then we had suggested that yes, but maybe even though Yetzias Mitzrayim was in Nissan, maybe we only count the years of Yetzias Mitzrayim from Tishrei. To which we said it can't be. Because one pasuk says that when Aharon died, it's the V'yal Aharon HaKohen el Hor HaHor Al Pi Hashem V'gomer, that it says that Aharon died essentially in Av, and then only later on, that it was in the 40th year in Shvat that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden. So therefore it must mean that Rosh Chodesh is that we count for the kings from, or that Yetzias Mitzrayim was from Nisan, so that you can have Av and then Shvat both in the 40th year. But then we suggested, but how do we know that those psukim are in order? Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden before Aharon died, but that can't be. And it says, well, because it says that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden after Sichon was already smitten and dead. And Ve'omer, and the pasuk says, Vayishma Knani Ve'gomer, that the Knani, who we said was Sichon, heard that Aharon died, and he therefore went to smite the Yidden. Ve'omer, the pasuk says, Vayiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aharon ve'gomer, that all the Yidden saw that Aharon died, and it says not Vayiru, but rather Vayiro, they were exposed, and that's why Sichon attacked them. So we see that Memele, when Aharon died, Sichon was still alive, and if it says that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke with the Yidden after Sichon was already dead, so then Memele, it was after Aharon already died, so it must be that Av of the 40th year came before Shvat of that year, and therefore it must be that we're counting the years from Yetzias Mitzrayim from Nissan and not from Tishrei. But then we suggest, but can't it be Iyar? We say no, it can't be Iyar because it says that the Mishkan was erected on Nissan of the second year, which if the year starts from Iyar, then Nissan would be the last month of that year. But it also says that in Iyar of the second year, the clouds were lifted from the Mishkan, which means that Memele, it can't be that Iyar was the first month of the year and the clouds were lifted, and that Nisan was the last month of that year, and the Mishkan was only erected the last month. Then how could the clouds be lifted off? The only way to say it would be that Iyar was the next year, the third year, but it wasn't the third year, it was the second year, so it can't be Iyar. And then we suggested, what about Sivan? No, v'omer, the pasuk says, b'chodesh hashlishi l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael v'gomer. It says it can't be Sivan because it says that in the third month since the Yidden left Egypt, they got to Midbar Sinai, and if it was already the second year, it would say the third month and the second year, so it doesn't say that, so it must still be the first year. Then we suggested maybe it could be Tammuz, maybe it could be Av, maybe it could be Adar. V'omer, the pasuk says in Divrei Hayamim, v'yochel livnos v'gomer, that Shlomo Melech began to build the base Hamikdash, Bashana Sheni, Basheni, and the question is, what's the Sheni, which we said is the second month when we start counting the rule of the king. So we see Memele that, what do we see Memele? We see that we start counting for kings from Nisan. Wow, oh my goodness gracious, how y'all doing? Oh my gosh, y'all good, right? Everyone got that. Alright, everyone, not only do they get that, we're all ready for more. So, without further ado, I just realized why it's so dark in here. Because all the light bulbs keep on dying. As I mentioned maybe like a month or two ago, in Eretz Yisrael the light bulbs don't die, they explode. So Pashit, my gosh, you turn on the lights, and Pashit, you like there's an explosion. You don't know what the heck just happened. And then, the circuit breaks and everything, you lose internet, and you gotta go to the thing and turn it back on. It's crazy. You turn on the lights, you just hope for the best. That's part of the perks of living in Eretz Yisrael. Amr V'chizda says V'chizda, Lo shanu ela l'malchi Yisrael, when we say that we count for kings from Nisan, says only for the Yiddish kings, only for Jewish kings. But for the kings of the nations of the world, we count their reign from Tishrei. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Nechemia ben Chachalya, that the words of Nechemia ben Chachalya, who's Nechemia, Vayiba Chodesh Kislev Shnas Esim v'Gomer, it was in Kislev of the 20th year. Uchsev, in the pasuk says, Vayiba Chodesh Nisan Shnas Esrim le'artach Shasta v'Gomer, and it was in Nisan, the 20th year of Artach Shasta. So we're saying that, well, if Kislev and Nisan were both in the 20th year of his reign, so Memele, we must be counting the years of the reign from Tishrei, because if we're counting from Nisan, then Nisan already would be the 21st year. Okay. Midukoi b'Kislev v'Karle Shnas Esrim, from the fact that the first pasuk is talking about Kislev of the 20th year, and then we get to Nisan and we still call it the 20th year. Michlad Rosh Hashanah lav Nisan, who it must mean that Rosh Hashanah is not Nisan, it must be Tishrei. Bishlama heyach mefarish tilatach shasta. So I understand the second pasuk says the 20th year of the reign of Artach Shasta. Elahai mimai tilatach shasta. How do I know that the first pasuk doesn't mention Artach Shasta? The first pasuk just says 20th years. It doesn't say the 20th year to what? Dilma, Lemidyon Achrino. Maybe it's some other 20-year counting. So my Papa Shnas Esrim L'Gzeira Shavos, as we referenced on Beis and Beis that we learned earlier today, that Rav Papa has a Mesorah, has a tradition of Gzeira Shava, that the pasuk says Shnas Esrim in both of these psukim. Ma'chosim la'Artaxerxes, just like in the second pasuk, it's the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes. Hafachah la'Artaxerxes, and also over here, it's the first pasuk is also the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes. So Memele, if Kislev and Nisan were both in the same year, it must be in the 20th year. So it must be that we're counting the year of Artaxerxes' reign from Tishrei. Fine. How do I know that the first pasuk of Kislev, the first pasuk that we mentioned, Kislev of the 20th year, how do we know that that preceded the pasuk that talks about Nisan of the 20th year? Maybe they're out of order. Maybe the pasuk that talks about Nisan actually happened before the pasuk that talks about Kislev. So therefore, maybe the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes actually did begin in Nisan, and the pasuk in Nisan came first, and then comes Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, and that's when that first pasuk is talking about. But the reign was counted from Nisan, and Nisan came first, Kislev came later, and the psukim are just out of order. To which the Gemara says, "Lo sagadaitech," that cannot be. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Dvarim she'omer Chanani leNechemya bekislev amoron Nechemi lemelech benisin. Uwa. Because we have a Brisa that says that the things that Hanani communicated to Nehemiah in Kislev, Nehemiah then reported to the king in Nisan, which is very interesting. When you think about it, right? You can imagine the dialogue between Hanani and Nehemiah happening in Kislev, right? What was it? Tishrei Cheshvan Kislev, Teves, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, right? And Hanani says, look, Nehemiah, I know that you're close to the king. I need you to give him this update. And Nehemiah says, look, I'll do it, but it's going to take some time. And he only got his opportunity 4 months later in Nisan. Anyways, I'm digressing, but it's just like I can imagine interesting dialogue, Hanani needs Nehemiah to do something for him, but Nehemiah says, look, it's the king. It's going to take some time. Anyways, so he got his opportunity in Nisan. So therefore, Kislev, so Hanani spoke to Nehemiah in Kislev, and then he reported it to the king in Nisan, which means that Kislev came before Nisan, and they're both in the 20th year. So Memele, it's talking about Nisan. I'm sorry. So Memele, the years of the king are counted from Tishrei. Fine. Shenemar, as the pasuk says by Hanani, Divi Nehemiah ben Chachalya. The first pasuk in Sefer Nehemiah says that the words of Nehemiah ben Chachalya, Vayiba Chodesh Kislev, it was in the month of Kislev, Shnas Esrim, in the 20th year. Vani Ayisi b'Shushan Abira. I was in the capital city of Shushan. Vayavai Hanani, and Hanani came, Echad mi'achai, one of my brothers, Hu va'anoshim mi Yehuda, him and some other folk from Yehuda, from Eretz Yisrael. Ve'eshalim ala Yehudim, and I asked them about the Yidden. Ha'pleita asher nisharu min hashevi, the remnants who went to Eretz Yisrael from the Golus in Bavel. Va'al Yerushalayim, and I asked Hanani about Yerushalayim. Vayomruli, and Hanani reported back to me, Hanishar asher nisharu min hashvi, that these Yidden who are Dar'in in Eretz Yisrael, Sham B'Medina Bira Gedola. They are Dar'in in Eretz Yisrael in very bad situations. Uvecherpa, and in disgrace, V'chomas Yerushalayim Meforetzes, and the walls of Jerusalem are breached. Usharei Nitzisu Va'esh, and the gates are lit in fire. So that is what Hanani reported to Nehemiah in Kislev. Amor Nehemiah lemelech b'Nisan, and Nehemiah reported that to Artaxerxes in Nisan. Shenemar, as the pasuk says in the second parak of Sefer Nehemiah, Vaybechodesh Nisan, it was in the month of Nisan, Shnas Esrim Artaxerxes Hamelech, the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes the king. Yain lefanav, there was wine dartin. Va'esa esayain, and I lifted up the wine. Va'etna lemelech, and I gave it to the king. And I was not accustomed to being negative and to being down and to being downtrodden and sad before the king. And therefore the king noticed that I was distracted. Vayomer li hamelech, and the king said to me, Madua panecha roim v'ata ein chachole. So the king said that, why do you look so nervous? You're not sick. Ein zekim ralev. This must be that you're scheming something bad about me. Va'ira harbe, right? That you're scheming to kill me. Did you poison my wine? Va'ira harbe me'od. And Nehemiah reports that he got very nervous. Va'omar lamelech. And I said to the king, Hamelech le'olam yichye. This is not the case. May the king live forever. Madura lo yiru fanai. Why would lo yeru yeru? I can't read. Yeru fanai. Why should my face not be downtrodden and sad? Asher ir beis kivros avosai. That the city that is the burial place of my fathers, Chareva, is destroyed. V'sharia ukilu ba'esh. And the gates have been consumed in fire. Vayomer li Amelech ama ze ata mevakesh. And the king Artaxerxes said to me, what are you asking for, Nehemiah? V'espalel el Elokei Hashamayim. And then I prayed quickly under my breath to the Eibishter. Va'omar lamelech. And then I said to the king, Im al Melech tov, if it's good for the king, v'mitav avducha lefanecha, and if your servant is good before you, asher tishlacheni el Yehuda. May you send me to Yehuda, to Eretz Yisrael, El Ir Kivros Avosai, to the city where my fathers are buried, Va'evnena, and I will build it, Darton, and I will build it up. Vayomer li Amelech, V'hashegel Yosheves Etzlo, and the king said to me, and his wife, the queen, was sitting next to him, Ad Mosa yeh mehalachicha, how long will it take you on your journey till you get there and then get back? Umasai Toshuv, when will you return? Vayitov lifnei Amelech, and he told him, and the king was okay with it. Vayishlacheni, and he sent me. V'etna lo zman, and I told him how long it was going to take. So we see from there that Hanani first spoke to Nehemiah in Kislev, and then he reported to the king in Nissan. So we see that the pasuk of Kislev came before the pasuk of Nissan, and they were both in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes. So we see Memele that we must be counting the years from Kislev and not from Nissan. Chaver, we're going to stop here, shtickle, because there was enough spaghetti to go around, I think, for one daf. So yeah, friends, what do we talk about today? Basically, what we talked about today is we're trying to figure out how do we know that Rosh Hashanah for kings is really from Nissan. Essentially, it comes from the pasuk that says that Shlomo HaMelech began counting. Shlomo HaMelech began building the Beis Hamikdash in the second month, and we want to say it's the second month from when we start counting for the kings. Rosh Hashanah l'Melachim is Nissan, and then he started building the Beis Hamikdash in the second month of the year, which is Iyar, which is also the second month when you start counting for the kings. So we see that we count for the second for the Rosh Hashanah from Melachim from Nissan. We had all sorts of other suggestions, maybe Iyar, maybe Sivan, Tammuz, Av, all sorts of stuff, but that didn't end up working out. And then Rav Chizda then said the halach at the end that, well, kind of in the middle, that kind of took us to the end, which is that the Rosh Hashanah for Jewish kings is from Nissan, the Rosh Hashanah for non-Jewish kings is from Tishrei. Friends, that was Daf Gimel, Masechta Rosh Hashanah. I hope you enjoyed. B'tei Avon.